Thank you to the organizers, which are the people I work with, for inviting me, and I'm really happy to speak here. So we've been, just like the last two speakers, if you've been here, they've been talking about MCP gateways, AI gateways. We are also at Obot AI building an MCP gateway. And as we've been building it, we've realized that the OAuth story in MCP has a long way to go. And so we've run into a lot of issues, a lot of technical problems, and a lot of user story problems. And I wanted to share some of my learnings with you today. So my plan of attack is just that. I'll give you a quick overview of the Obot gateway, what it looks like, and why it's a little bit different. I want to talk about the struggle we've had with metadata URLs, with scopes, and then lastly, just wrap up with some things that I probably don't have enough time to get into. So. Just real quick about me. Again, Donnie Adams. I work for Obot AI. I am a software architect, which sounds a little bit snobbier than it should be, but I'm essentially an engineer building products with a whole host of other folks. I've been a professional developer for about 6 years, 6.5 almost. Before that, I was a mathematician and a high school math teacher. And I'm also, my spare time, I am a high school basketball coach in the States, which I enjoy very, very much. And I just want to shout out these folks. Like, I'm up here presenting some work that I've done, but it's because of these people that I work with, the entire engineering team. It's small enough I can get them all on one slide. So this is work joint that I've done with them. I wanted to call them out. And Will is on the list. He's technically not part of the engineering team anymore at Obot, but I needed the columns to be the same size, so I threw them in there. A few notes about what's happening here. I am not an OAuth expert. I am not even an MCP expert if such a thing exists, right? This is all very, very new. I'm just showing you what I've done, what we've done, and the troubles that we've run into, okay? The other thing is MCP is quickly changing. I wrote this talk and submitted this, and since I've done that, everything that I've talked about has changed in the MCP specification that's upcoming. And I'm not kidding, and I'm pointing some of those things out. It's changing very, 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 very quickly. I just want to present my experiences. This will be technical, so if you're, just want to give that out, like I'm going to be showing RFCs and different pieces of the spec. We're going to kind of get into the weeds on some of this. And I'm not trying to nitpick any specific server or client or anything like that. We've had problems with all of them. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Back when I was a mathematician, I did pure math, and I talked to groups that are much, much smaller than this. I did theoretical math, and all of my applied mathematician friends would make fun of me, and this is the quote that they would always give me. So we have a lot of great ideas, but they don't always pan out in practice. And so hopefully I'm showing some of that here as well. So a quick thing about the Obot MCP gateway. Other gateways that we've seen, that I've seen outside of this, and maybe a couple that you've seen here as well, they take a slightly different approach to the approach that we've taken. So they ask you to set up your MCP server in their platform. They ask you to connect I'm using Outlook in this case, they ask you to connect your account. And then they give you a URL. And you can use that URL, but that's about it. It's locked to your account. If you gave that URL out to somebody else, they probably couldn't do anything with it. And even if they did, they'd only get your emails, right, in this particular case. So every user has to do this for themselves and get their own URL, which is fine. Like, it's nice to know that I have my MCP server that is connected to my Outlook account and nobody else can use it. That's good. But every user has to do this. So every user in your enterprise, any user in your company would have to do the same thing. We've taken a slightly different approach where you can set up the Outlook MCP server in Obot, and there is one URL. And that URL you can share with anybody in your company, anybody who has access to Obot, and they can use that. And the MCP server that they're using will connect to their account. They'll OAuth with Outlook, and that will be theirs. So if I use that MCP server, it will be scoped to my Outlook account. If Will were to use that with his, it would be scoped to his, and so on. So it's a slightly different approach. And it's a subtle change, but it actually has changed, it changes the architecture of our system pretty significantly. So I wanted to show just quickly, and I'm gonna, it's mirrored, so I'm gonna have to do it this way. But you can see here, this is just a quick example of what Obot looks like. You can see I've had one MCP server deployed, the DuckDuckGo MCP server. And if I go down to Visual Studio Code, which is my client, it's hard to see, but maybe I can do it this way. There we go. Okay, that's the same URL that I had on the screen before. So, and I did not have Outlook configured in my setup or anything like that. But I can click Start here, and it's going to ask me to authenticate. Now, turns out that because this is our OAuth application, the Outlook MCP server uses our OAuth application, it automatically approves it for me. I don't have to click on it, but it will show you that it's going to go to Obot. Obot will then have you authenticate with Outlook, and then it will redirect back to Obot. So if I click the allow here, you can see, it's maybe hard to see, but you can see this is going to chat.obot.ai, so it's redirecting to there. I can open that up. And it'll flash Microsoft. There it is, but it's already got me, so it redirects automatically. And I come back to Visual Studio Code, and my MCP server is running. It has 17 tools, and so on and so forth. So again, that's just a quick demo of what it looks like. If I were to hand that to somebody else, anybody else in this room, because chat.obot.ai is open and available for folks to use, you can take that same URL and do it for you as well. And the the Outlook MCP server will be scoped to you and not me. So it's again, it's a subtle thing, but it's a cool architecture difference that has proved to give us a lot of interesting, make sure I do that right, a lot of interesting insight into the entire process. So when a client makes a request to Obot MCP, we are the authorization server, we are the MCP server, and we also are the MCP client, because then we're proxying that through to the actual MCP server on the other side, the OAuth, in this case, the Outlook MCP server. So every aspect of the spec we have built and interacted with, every piece of it, whether it's the dynamic client registration, the metadata URLs, the responding to 401 requests, all those things, we have implemented that and had to deal with it. So it kind of gives us a little bit of a unique experience with the whole system. So, I missed something there. One thing I wanted to say too is Nanobot is the client and the server in this case. And if you're interested in some of those details, Darren Shepard is giving a talk later this afternoon on his experience building agents with Nanobot. Just wanted to throw that out there because it's an exciting project. It uses MCP UI and things like that. It's really cool. Anyway. So now we're getting into the more technical pieces. So this is pulled straight from the MCP spec. This is the authorization flow. Okay, so if you make a request and that to an MCP server and that MCP server wants to use OAuth, then it actually, this is the entire flow that you go through. The piece that I want to draw your attention to is just the top piece for just now, so, or I guess the top half. So you make the request without a token and you get the 401 back. Perfect. Okay, that's standard, that's how it works. And then eventually you get down here to the user authorizes. Okay, and that's, I click OK, I sign in, I authorize the app, so on and so forth. This is the same picture, but this is how Obot does it. Okay, so the same request is made at the top where the MCP client hits the gateway without the token, it gets back the 401. But you can see the user authenticates there, right in the middle. That's the authentication with Obot. Do you have access to this MCP server in the gateway? Okay. Then, as soon as Obot verifies that it's you, you log in, we determine you have access, then we do the entire process again, one more time. Where we are the client, now Obot is the client, and makes the request to the actual MCP server to determine, does it need OAuth? If it does, it goes through the same exact process, and the user authenticates with the third-party application, calls back to us, we do token exchange, and then finally the MCP client at the very end does token exchange again. So again, the whole process laid out. We are the authorization server, the MCP client, all those things. Again, it gives us a unique experience here. So there it is. We've outlined, there's the first authorization, the second authorization, the second callback rather, and then the first callback. It all happens in one flow. So now we're going to get into some of the issues that we've come across. And it starts with the first request. The very first request in that whole thing at the top is you make a request without a token and you get a 401 back. It seems really simple, right? I make a request, I get a 401, and I start the whole process. It turns out that it's not. What if the request has an expired token? What happens then? This picture doesn't outline that. And every client that I've worked with handles it differently. VS Code, for example, makes you completely delete all of your credentials and start over again. It will not, if it has an expired token that it can't use and it gets a 401 back, it will not do anything else. Okay, so there's one example. What if this isn't the initialize request? What if I'm making a tool calls request or a tools list request? What happens then? This doesn't outline that. Again, every MCP client that I've worked with handles it differently. I'll tell you this, Nanobot does, well, I'll go through, we'll get there. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. The second thing is, or the third thing rather, 1, 2, 3, mathematician, right? The token is valid, but the scopes have changed. So the scopes of your OAuth token have changed. What happens then? And it turns out this one is going to be really solved very, very nicely, and I'm pretty excited about that, and I'll share more of that at the end. So if the request is made with an expired token, I've already kind of went over that. This one here is the interesting one. What if this is not the initialize request? This is a tool call or a tool list or a resource get or whatever. I like the way that we did it, of course, but Nanobot does this by just doing the whole flow again. So if you make a tool list request and you get a 401 with the correct www authenticate header, we just do the whole flow again. That's easiest for the user is what we found, and that's kind of my theme when we get to some later things, is what's easiest for the user. And then the last one we'll talk about, again, there's a change coming that I'm pretty excited about there. So again, this, you might have seen this, is you have to delete everything and start over. This is what VS Code makes you do. We run into that quite often. So let's talk about that third point, the scopes. And again, this is what I'm actually really, really excited about this. It solves a lot of problems for us. And there's an extension of this too that I won't have time to get into, but I'm also very excited about that. So scopes, I was told by our president that I need to tell you what scopes are. So I'm going to do that. I didn't have time to create a slide for it, but so scopes, when you create an OAuth token, for those that don't know, you click the authorize in the UI, you're granting permission for that client to have those scopes to make those types of requests to your system. So if I grant you the read user scope, but you try to change my user, you try to write user, then I'll deny that as a 403 forbidden, right? You don't have the scope to do that. Okay? So in the MCP specification, it doesn't talk about scopes really at all yet. It will, but it doesn't yet. The problem is that both OAuth protected resource, that metadata, and the authorization server metadata both have a scopes supported field. Well, which one do you use? Well, the other problem with that, like which one do I use? The other problem is the last line there is what I wanted to point out. This is from the RFC for protected metadata, protected resource metadata. Protected resources may choose not to advertise certain scopes for security reasons. Okay, so if you're not going to tell me what scopes that I need to request, that's hard for me to get the right token, right? And then same thing with the authorization server metadata. It has the same language. Servers may choose not to advertise certain supported scopes. Okay, how do I know? The consensus early on seemed to be that if the OAuth protected resource metadata had a supported scopes, you would use that. If not, then you would use the authorization server metadata. However, that's wrong. Okay, you should not use the scope supported from the authorization server metadata because You want the idea of least privilege, right? You want to only request the scopes that you absolutely need to complete the job that you're trying to accomplish. And if I use every scope supported by the authorization server, then of course I'm not doing that. I'm opening up myself to huge vulnerabilities. The other thing is it doesn't always work. There was one MCP server, again, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not trying to say anybody did anything bad, but there was one MCP server where if you use the scopes supported from the OAuth protected resource metadata, the server would actually crash. And then if you used all of the ones from the authorization server metadata, everything worked fine. Okay? Which again is a little bit backwards. Now this is going in very soon. It has approvals already from the appropriate people. It just hasn't been merged yet. But it introduces the best way, in my opinion, so far, to actually tell MCP clients which scopes that it needs to request in order to work with this MCP server. So now the www authenticate header will come back with a scope parameter in it, and those are the scopes that you're supposed to request. Yay. Now I know I have an explicit example. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. So here's one quick example. The www authenticate comes back with bare resource metadata that I'm supposed to follow and the exact scope that I need to request in order to work with this MCP server. That's great. It's much better. It's more explicit. It is better for the users. Okay? But the next question comes in, what if the scopes change? What if I've improved my MCP server and now instead of just reading, I can also write? Or instead of working with only repositories, now I can work with issues. I've expanded the scopes that I need to work with. What if those change? So going back to this picture that we had before, what happens if these scopes change in this request? Still not handled, but this SEP does handle it for us. It introduces, again, a really cool way, what makes it easy for our users to actually accomplish this goal. So this is taken straight from what will be going into the next version, but by the way, if you don't know, the next version of the MCP spec was announced to be released on November 25th of this year, so very exciting about that. But this will be in that version of the spec. If we have insufficient scope during any runtime process, so if I'm listing tools, if I'm calling a tool, if I'm getting resources, anything like that, I can return a 403 forbidden with a www authenticate header that tells you the problem and what scopes you actually need to request. That's much better. Again, better for our users. Instead of failing, I give you an out. I give you an opportunity to correct, and then you can make the tool call again. So here's a quick example of that. Again, pulled from this SEP is you have insufficient scope. I need you to request these additional scopes. Here's the resource metadata field. Go ahead and go do that. So before, when we tried to make a request with, like a tool call example here, if we make a request with the token and we don't have sufficient scopes, we just get an error back. Okay? And depending on the MCP server, I've seen this actually be a 403 HTTP status, or I've seen this come back as JSON RPC error. Okay? Everybody does it a little bit differently. Probably should be a JSON RPC error, but that's just my opinion. And again, we get back to this dreaded box from VS Code is I have to delete and start over again. Okay? But now we have a better flow. As of November 25th, we'll have this great flow that we can put our users back through. We make the call with the token. We get back the 403. We go through the authorization process. And then at the very end, we make the call again, and we get the tool call response. So maybe I have to display a pop-up to my users to say, hey, you need to log in again, or you need to, there's an issue that we need to correct. But they don't have to go figure out how to delete anything. They don't have to find the special file that a certain client might use and delete something, or find a token encrypted someplace on your file system. None of that. Just put them back through the flow, and now I have the correct token. A much better flow. I hope that we can agree on that. Some other items that we don't have time to cover right now in the last 5 minutes. Authorization server metadata. GitHub broke everything. Again, not calling them out, but they broke everything. When they released their public MCP server, it had a path in it. And then so did their resource metadata field, and so did their authorization server metadata URL. And that broke every client because we all assumed that everything was at the root, right? And then depending on if it's OIDC or OAuth authorization, you have to put the path in certain places. It's a nightmare. So authorization server net metadata, we didn't get a chance to get into that in detail, but it's still a problem, okay? Dynamic client registration. This is something that we've run into a lot of issues with, specifically MCP servers that are nervous about opening up their MCP service to any dynamic client that they want. We've seen them locked down by IP address. We've seen them locked down based on redirect URI domains. You have to get your domain approved to be able to redirect and all those things. The other thing is, and this is something that is near and dear to my heart, having built most of the authorization server stuff in Obot, is when can I delete these dynamic clients? Right? Am I just going to have this dynamic client living in my system forever? I hope not. And then even if if a user goes through the flow and deletes their client from VS Code and then reconnects, it actually registers another client. And so now I've just got this whole database full of dynamic client registrations, and can I get rid of them? There is an extension of requiring that dynamic clients, essentially a lifetime ping. Every so often you have to update and you get back a new client secret or something like that. There is an extension of that, an RFC of that, and I hope that makes its way into the MCP protocol because we need a way to manage these. Out-of-band third-party access, that one is a big deal. In order to be able to, that token, all this OAuth stuff, that token that the client ends up getting is just to authorize you to that MCP server. That MCP server is not supposed to use it to make other requests, right? Again, GitHub is special because GitHub controls its entire lifecycle. But in other situations, that's not true, and it's insecure. And we've got a lot of feedback from the MCP auth group on that regard as well. We have a really nice idea, we think, of how to handle that. It's not implemented yet, which is why I'm not talking about it, but we have a really nice idea that I hope maybe at the next Dev Summit, somebody can talk about that. Apparently that was there twice for some reason, all right. And then MCP request IDs is outside the scope of auth, but we've had a lot of problems with that too. A lot of problems. People don't like strings. I don't know why people don't like strings, but they don't, and they don't handle them well. They don't error, but they do other things with them, and it's very frustrating. So we've had to put special code in our client to handle those situations. So again, if you, Obot and Nanobot are both of our open source. They're both open source on GitHub, available. You can download, run them in your system. You can run them locally. You can run them locally on your system, and it will use Docker to run MCP servers, or you can use connect to remote MCP servers. Nanobot is our MCP client and server implementation. It also does, again, Darren's talk later is going to talk about how he uses it to build agents with UI and all those types of things. So a really cool project as well. We just used the very basic part of it in Obot itself. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.